eternal question is, what are we doing as parents? I developed the lecture because I was having an online discussion with some families, and the question was, my 4-year-old doesn't want to sit at the table, doesn't want to eat, and doesn't want to go to bed. That led to, well, I just can't say what to do because we really want to solve the problem, not just this is how we were directed. So that opened up the question, like, really, what are we doing as parents?
We can really be stimulated as parents to then want to get things to look right. So what I find is that the real way for growth and actual healing to happen is to connect with the inside.
When we speak about ages and stages, that's just using what we have learned from observing thousands and thousands of kids. And so we kind of use that to make sure that the child's moving on, at least in a reasonable forward progression, not getting too far behind.
Sometimes a kid can be having some kind of feeling or behavior that's getting our attention and making us feel worried that they're kind of like not on track, maybe with or something, like something's getting our attention. And sometimes kids have experienced something that we didn't know happened that affected them.
Welcome to the Dr. Thornburg Wellness Podcast, where pediatrics meets functional medicine, blending science-backed insight, common sense, and a touch of shamanic wisdom from a father of 8. Hi, I'm Dr. Brian Thornburg, and on today's episode of You Asked, I am with Sara Henry. She is a longtime family and marriage therapist here in Naples, Florida, with over 30 years of experience, and she's taken care of quite a few of my patients as well as some of my own children. And she's a depth of knowledge, approaches health and mental health from a 360 perspective, very integrated and very productive. I mean, I've seen amazing turnaround in the kids that she has helped and the families that she's helped. So I thought it'd be great to bring her knowledge to you all. Welcome, Sara.
What a nice introduction.
Yeah, I didn't laugh that time.
No.
I've known you for quite a while, so
Yes,
that's what there's a
yes.
comfort level.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. And thank you for having me, Brian.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm such a big fan of yours and so appreciative of your care and also looking out for safety for children for so long. So, and I know you to be quite a creative fellow, and that's what it takes, right?
Right, it does. Well, yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the reverse introduction.
Yeah.
So you've been here for 30, just practiced here in Naples for 30 years, or were you somewhere else?
No, I was in Los Angeles for half of that time, or a little bit, well, just about half.
15 years of that, 30. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're from California?
Or anyway, the numbers are, so we've been here since 2009. So I've been practicing here since 2009.
Okay, that makes sense. That's about the time I saw your name starting to pass through.
Oh, yeah.
Pass through my office. It was right around there or sometime after that. And go ahead.
Well, when I first got here, I was looking around and thinking it would be really nice to bring the early intervention folks more together with the mental health folks, and that's really important to me, how those two come together: developmental issues, mental health issues, because often they're split up. And so where I was coming from, also that was a problem of siloing. You see developmental issues in this camp, and then mental health issues in this other camp, and how do you put it all together? So when I first came into town, I thought I was meeting some really wonderful people who were doing great things in the community right off the bat. And somebody suggested that I put together a conference, and so I put together a conference and bringing people actually from around the country to speak on that, and how understanding ages and stages, especially social emotional ages and stages, comes together with mental health issues for young children.
Explain that a little bit more. Ages and stages, for those that don't understand, is like when you're 2 months old, you can hold up your head. And then at 6 months old, you're sitting up and you're starting to take some food. And then at 15 months old, you have a sense of independence. And so you're walking and you have enough words to get by. And so you want to explore your larger environment past mommy and daddy. So that's ages and stages. How would that correlate with mental health?
Well, so there are those ages and stages, which are, of course, really important to track. And there are the social emotional ages and stages, which are the very early stage of more of that oneness experience with a parent that an infant has, and then going to, the back and forth, a little bit of back and forth that starts happening in very subtle gestures. So that's where, your child is looking at you, but then looks over to see, where daddy is, where mommy is, like it looks for, or where the cozy blanket is. And then you're reading that little gesture. And so that's like the very beginnings of the back and forth, or really more basic than that is a kind of a gesture for food, right? And reading that. And so that becomes more the back and forth. And these are the fundamental stages of all the complex interaction and problem solving, intellectual development, pulling it all together in relationship and intellectually and in our hearts. That just leads to everything else, all our relationships, our intellectual accomplishments, everything. So those are the ages and stages I'm talking about. They're social emotional ages and stages. And I noticed that, who was it, Emily Ring,
yes,
the speech pathologist you had on, she was talking about, looking for engagement,
right?
How the engagement is taking place. So I'm sure that she really has her eye on those things. And so, looking at those ages and stages, you're looking at quality of relationship and just, how many and what the quality of the circles of communication between a caregiver and a child, or, other relationships after that, take place.
And they stack. They're foundational. It's like
they're foundational. That is absolutely right. They're foundational.
And they stack. And like, for example, geometry. You have to understand what a plane is before you can start to take apart a proof. So there has to be that initial connection that I feel safe in my environment. Mom's meeting my needs. Mom's the primary caregiver for those first 3 years of life. Mm-hmm. So that relationship with mom is really foundational. Mm-hmm. Is mom meeting my needs? Does she come in a reasonable amount of time when I call out, so I don't feel whatever infant's going to feel abandoned or not taken care of? Or...
Absolutely. And Brian, you see very distinctly how safety influences things. When you look at these subtle interactions of communication, the nonverbal interactions, that set the stage for verbal interactions to come forth. So say, a child is hungry, and they feel safe. They feel safe enough to let their eyes kind of move around to, is mommy gonna get ready, to feed me? And mommy's tracking that, say. But if something in the environment is creating a sense that there's some lack of safety, there's some kind of threat in the environment, or perceived threat, right? Then you can see how quickly something like that would be derailed, because then a child's attention, even in that very early time, can be going to what is this input that I'm perceiving of threat. And of course it's very instinctual. Like I'm narrating it from, in a sophisticated way, but you can see there's a lot of great research with infant mental health and development, where you can just, can see the disruption happen. So right there, a child is learning to split their attention into, hold on here, like, am I okay? Away from bypassing their needs, like hunger, mm-hmm. getting food. So this is a really delicate dance, and these kinds of cues are just going on, very rapidly. They grow very rapidly with children, and taking care of that environment is very important.
That's so a child perceives a threat.
Mm-hmm.
So they split their attention between, I'm 2 months old, I need mom to feed me,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something in my environment that has me on guard.
Yeah.
And it's primitive because
Yes,
we're
speaking very primitive here.
very primitive at this age. Could it be something like a dog barking? Or,
Yeah.
or what would define a threat?
Well, that's why I say perceived threat.
Right.
Because of course, when we come into the world, like, what do we know?
Right.
It's like, and so that's part of the dance with a parent, with a caregiver, is actually registering that a child seems to be in a kind of
Fight or flight, or
in a hyper aroused state, a fight or flight kind of reaction, and then we get curious. Why would that be happening? Oh, that dog.
okay.
Or that's a new dog. Is a new neighbor has moved next door. Now we can hear their dog, and that wasn't here before. It can be so.
Really anything's possible to create the perceived threat because everybody has a different tolerance and threat level.
It's true. Yeah.
Yep. So if mom's distracted, say mom is returning to work and
Mm-hmm.
the child's getting ready for daycare,
Mm-hmm.
or they're preparing to put the child into daycare, and mom is now distracted because she has to return to work, and that distraction could be perceived as a threat. Could we say that? Just trying to put a little kind of practical definition on.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that could be, how situations like that are handled are, families work out all kinds of things, right? Because, there's dad, there's grandma, there's other caregivers that, there's how we kind of like pass the ball between us of picking up on baby's needs and things, right? And keeping that fluidity and also recovering. Because we can't all like interpret things perfectly all the time. It's really, just the dedication to it and as much follow through as we can balance.
So rather than it being a particular trigger into the perceived lack of safety, it's reading the infant's disposition, ongoing reactions to decide if they're becoming more singularly feeling safe, or are they having to divest themselves of just focused on feeding and growing and living and learning to protecting themselves in some way, which would, for that age, crying, irritability, lack of sleep.
Stiff back.
Stiff back?
Oh,
stiff back. Yep. Getting tense.
Getting tense.
Yeah. Get ready for a fight. It's kind of like what we would do. Yeah, just very primal.
Yeah.
Fight or flight.
Well, and don't we get very primal when we're in fight
When
or
we're
flight
scared.
at any age,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
And
it even can. Yes, 100%.
And that's the thing with when we get triggered at different ages, that we regress.
Right. Well, we
Right.
go back to our whatever our way of finding safety as a younger person. We regress.
Yeah.
Yes. So is there trying to understand my training from an osteopath medical training into a psychological background, because they're parallel, but they're distinct, is for the first 3 years, mom is typically the primary caregiver. So would that translate into the child really learning the attachments and the nonverbal cueing more off mom because dad isn't as interactive? Or is this kind of an older perception of dads aren't as participatory in those first 3 years? The way I've always understood is, since mom's meeting most, if not almost all the needs for those first several years, mom's the primary caregiver, moms are about attachment, dads are about separation. And that would be when dad would become more important in the child's development when the child's ready to become more social, which is going to be that 3-year-old, because now the child's going to watch dad going into the world and how he handles situations. So I have to say I'm borrowing this heavily from Jordan Peterson, who's instructed me a lot, who I listen a lot to.
Okay.
So this is where this is.
Well, I think there's something to that. And I think also that men and women have the full complement of those abilities. And are there different kinds of strengths, like between individuals, and that sometimes fall down between on gender lines? Yes. And men, of course, and are fully capable of being very nurturing of children at the earliest stages, and sometimes have to be, right? I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't kind of divide up like that always.
No, and I have dads in the practice who are primary caregivers because mom's working and dad's at home as a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah. So, but I hear what you're saying, and actually, the point I want to pull out of that a little bit more is the need for what we call bonding, that real sense of togetherness that we develop from. A really nice phrase that I heard you use was, what was it? Palpating. Oh, I can't remember now, but but because you're an osteopath, there's the thing of
the knowing, feeling, thinking, seeing.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, when a child comes right out of a mom's body, and they're just in there palpating with each other, they're in there sensing each other all the time, and a lot of things can happen in the course of 9 months or however long. But so it is quite like set up there when you come out, that you are in that, and being very close to mom in that. So, but we need to feel that bondedness and connection, and like you were also representing, like after emphasized after about 3 years, and with dad maybe, or just as a theme, the need for autonomy, the need for feeling like we have the strength and our own individual sense of purpose and being, to step out into the world, to feel our feet on the ground.
Right. So for me, in my model, would be at 15 months, the child now has the ability to walk, has a few words. They don't need mom and dad to carry them around anymore. As a matter of fact, they have what I call a download, a new developmental layer where they want to explore the environment past mom and dad. And so the Terrible Twos start at 15 months old because the child wants to learn where they live. And that's part of the autonomous walk is, okay, they take the spoon out of mom's hand when it's time to feed, or they push past mom and dad because they want to go, I do it. Yeah. So they move into, and the parents have to create an environment that's supporting that age and stage, where they set up a safe room, as opposed a safe room with gates, like a Montessori schoolroom, where that child can walk around and explore, and everything in that gated area is learnable, touchable, explorable, playable, and there's nothing there that's overtly dangerous to the child. And that's how we create a safe space for that autonomous level. But then outside of that gate, it's dangerous because they don't understand what's hurtful and what's not hurtful, as opposed to the parent that will just not create a boundary that's safe for the child, and will instead follow the child around. That isn't autonomy, that, to me, in terms of the energetic development of autonomy, that's the parent is now controlling the experience by standing guard over the experience, as opposed to letting the child kind of free play. Does that make, is this, I see this a lot in my practice. So.
Right. Yeah. So, no, it's interesting. I'm just thinking about, that idea of the planning that parents do to set up space for a child. That, it's an interesting inquiry. And what I hear you saying is, like, sort of like the difference between that and trying to stick with the child, anticipating their needs when maybe they need to be exploring.
Right. Well, that delays their milestones.
Yeah.
So I just had,
Yeah.
this morning I have a family. They have five children, and the youngest, we just spoke about this, or dad's a doctor and mom stays at home with the kids, and the youngest, because they're so busy with after school activities, that at this infant developmental stage, they're behind because it's grab the kid and let's go. Let's grab the kid and let's go.
Right,
So there's
right.
not enough independent time for the child to figure out how to go from laying to sitting to standing. So
Right.
because it's just on the go. And so we were speaking about sometimes parents, by necessity, circumstances, because of past trauma, will put, not necessarily, I don't want to make it sound bad, but put their needs, which is, I've got 4 other kids and we got after school activities, we got to pick them up from school, and baby's not the squeaky wheel. So baby gets picked up and off we go. And now they realize, oh, we're not meeting this child's
Right.
development.
Yeah.
And then I have another family that was in yesterday, and they don't have any boundaries in the house, and not in a bad way. They haven't set up a gate, to a gated area, and the whole house is the child has access. Little children have access to the whole house, and we started speaking about how difficult that is to stay on top of 3 kids moving in 3 different directions and keeping them safe. And so there's the parents thought they were doing something good by giving more autonomy, but it was almost so open-minded that it could be dangerous for the child.
Right. Yeah. So you're talking about staying in touch with where a child's needs for closeness and autonomy are, like kind of what the equation
Walking that line
of
all
that.
the time.
Yeah. And then one of the things is too of knowing like when you're creating that kind of space, even if it's including, at the appropriate age, going outside of the house or something like that, like how easy have you made it for a child to reach back to you, like once they've gone out, like to check back.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's how would you encourage that? Because you know that little kids, the 12 to 15 month old, more 15, 18, they'll run away from you and take 4 or 5 steps, and then they'll look back at you.
Right.
And they'll see if you're there.
Yeah.
And then they'll run a little bit more, and then they play the game, are you still following me? So how do you set that appropriate, yes, go on, little one, to I'm pulling you back in? For me, it's that we set the stage for a safe place,
Right.
so I can let you free play without my intervention. But once you move out of the safe space, out of that controlled room in the house, then you're with an adult who can, at times, will let you continue to free explore with their supervision, and other times, no, we're moving to get to the car to go to the grocery store. In which case, that's not time for free play.
Yeah.
So is there any advice on, other than what I just said, just kind of being practical?
I think you gave good advice.
Okay. Maybe I answered my own question. Okay.
Yeah.
I do have another question in terms of, you mentioned finding safe space for kids. And so this is, I just gave a lecture this weekend to the Weston Price Foundation,
Okay.
which is their Naples chapter. And they, do you know much about the Weston Price Foundation?
No, I don't.
So Weston Price was a dentist in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he, I don't know what motivated him, but he went around the world and started looking at different cultures and their oral hygiene and dental development. Because it was at that time, everything was pretty much taxonomy. They were just naming things. They didn't really understand things. So he went around the world and noticed that indigenous cultures that were eating whole foods had perfect teeth, perfect oral hygiene.
I have heard of it.
Okay. So then the foundation continued past his death, and they focus on whole foods and nutrition and essentially trying to live as close to the earth as possible. So I gave a talk to them this weekend, but it was on parenting. And the eternal question is, what are we doing as parents? And it's I developed the lecture because I was having an online discussion with some families, and the question was, my 4-year-old doesn't want to sit at the table, doesn't want to eat, and doesn't want to go to bed. And that led to, well, I just can't say what to do because we really want to solve the problem, not just this is how we redirect it. And so that opened up the question, like, really, what are we doing as parents? And parenting, I went back and pulled quotes of parenting from Greek philosophers, from Romans, from Middle Ages, and then I went to the major world religions and Judaism, Muslim, Christianity, and Buddhism.
Oh, interesting.
And essentially, they all said the same thing. We love our children. We would do anything for our child. We're here to develop our children. And so across time, across the ages,
people want to care for
people
children.
want to care for children.
Right.
It's a universal, concept. It's a classical approach.
And children want to be cared for.
Right. So I looked at the question from that standpoint, and also from a biological and ages and stages standpoint. So, and I said to the families that were there, and I said, what I'm going to say might sound very uncomfortable to you, but this is how I learn what I'm saying. Because if I push up on somebody and they feel uncomfortable, I want to know why you feel uncomfortable. And one of the things I will say in my practice, and one of the things I did with my 8 kids, was the circadian rhythm develops starting at 2 months old and is completed by 6 months old. And so a child has the full ability, physiologically, biologically, to sleep through the night between 2 months and 6 months old. And for the first couple of months of life, we feed a baby on demand every 3 hours. No, we don't really let them go longer than 3 hours until they have moved past newborn period enough that there's enough metabolic reserves to make it longer periods of time. But when they're inside the womb, they're fed by an umbilical cord, and there's a restrictive growth because the baby can't get so big in the womb that the baby can't come out, because that would not serve the species to be unable to deliver your baby. So there's a conservation of size to the baby. But once the baby comes out, because there was that conservation of size, the baby needs to be fed all the time because they don't have, you and I can go 12, 24, 72 hours without eating.
Right.
Baby would not do that because that would be dangerous. And so, when I have a new family come in for their newborn visit, they're like, oh, we already have a baby sleeping through the night. And I'll say, well, enjoy that, that's over. Because what that tells me is the baby's not getting enough food, so they're moved into conservation, which means they're shutting down to save energy. Because there's not enough energy to wake up and continue providing energy to all their basic core physiological needs, power up the brain, the organs, and do everything. So the baby's shutting down. So you can't do that anymore. You have to feed the baby every 3 hours. Starting at a month, if the baby wants to drop one of the night feeds, then they can, because there's enough metabolic reserves. But then the question I posed is, if there's a circadian rhythm, there is, and we know that it's set by 6 months, starts at 2 months, and so a baby has the biological, physiological ability to sleep through the night, and I didn't put it there, you didn't put it there, mom didn't put it there, God, if that's your belief system, or evolution, if that's your belief system, whatever,
it's
both
there.
roads, it's there.
Right.
And so when I have a mom, say, well, the baby wakes up at night and wants to feed, and I will say, well, do they want to feed, or are they just conditioned to feed? And then
how are you telling the difference, right?
Right, how are you telling the difference? Because God's not, and evolution's not going to play a joke and say, well, you need to feed the baby and they can sleep through the night. That it's incongruent, right? And so because the baby can sleep through the night, and I know from experience that they don't need to feed for 8 to 12 hours at night, that the circadian rhythm to me is the ruling factor. And I'll say to a mom who continues to feeding past, I said, that's fine. I understand sometimes, it's more comfortable and you want to have that bonding experience, and that's really important to you. But from a biological standpoint, the baby doesn't have a need to feed. So if you as a mom are feeling exhausted because you're getting up in the middle of the night, then that's not putting you into the best ongoing position to be the best mom you can be. Because being exhausted for a reason that's not necessary is not working towards your health, you're establishing good role modeling, setting up healthy boundaries that you're going to need later with the baby. The baby's not learning that they can do things that they're capable of doing, looking at the ages and stages. Because to me, you're regressing a child, a baby even, if you're not honoring them in their age and stage. So if a baby has an ability to sleep through the night, but I'm not honoring them that, then what am I putting my needs in front of the baby's needs at that point? So this is where it gets a little sticky with moms. And that's why I say, I'm not here to guilt you into having your baby sleep through the night, but understand that life is a series of ages and stages. And any one of us, once we acquire a certain stage and it's appropriate to our age, then we want to be honored in that. And that's part of the ongoing development between family, parent, and child, is we have to, when it's uncomfortable to me to let my 16-year-old get in a car with a boy for a date, I still have to let that go forward because that's part of even though it's uncomfortable for me, I'll have a conversation with the child about my discomfort. I'll make sure that the boy is not somebody that shouldn't be around my daughter at all and do the best I can to keep them safe, but I also have to let them go forward. So knowing that this is, going back to the 6 month sleeping, knowing that this is a sticky point for some moms, I carve it along the line of, if you're exhausted, you need to take action for yourself, because ultimately the child's looking to you, but how are boundaries set? Because where I see difficulties in kids is when there's not enough boundaries, parents are setting up, and this would be the first step in possible boundary, versus I'm too heavy with my boundaries and I'm requiring too much that's outside.
Well, Brian, you're really piquing my interest about something that's really important to me. And that's, how we, right from the beginning, are discerning, being in touch with something that's really happening with our children. Like, I mean, the difference between that and the signals we're getting about our own needs, our own past-based experiences, and how those can be filters like that. I don't know what I did to the microphone just then. Right from the get-go, and how we're perceiving our child's cues. Like you said, this, there are these biological functions that go a certain way, and they're pretty predictable. They can have a predictability about them, give or take, right? Like you were talking about, how often a child needs to feed and when they can start to establish different rhythms, just because that's what they're ready for biologically. And we hope, their biological readiness is right there in tandem with their infant psychological readiness, actually. And so right there in the dance is also how we as parents, are attending to that. And, things come up. Things come up when we're tired, and things flash before our eyes about the ways that we were parented and how we're reacting to that. And so, and then when you're saying, like, right all across the lifespan, but certainly the span of, being involved with parenting children, we're looking at the same thing of how we're tracking what their needs are, and really listening to, how it's occurring in them, the rhythms that are occurring in them, and then beyond that, like, their special gifts as individuals, right? As well, their unique kind of way of being in the world, and then how we have our own filters and how we're taking in those cues. So so that's all in the dance as we're, trying to promote their ability to stand on 2 feet, like you said, or stand in whatever way, whatever way they can and they need to. And so that's something else that and I know that you're very interested in too. And because I'm in the mental health field, and I work a lot with children and parents together or consulting or different things, that I'm thinking about how, what we bring and as parents, like when you said that you're aware as as a physician and the study that you've done and all the observations of families, right, over the years, you've had incredible experience, getting an understanding of these kind of basic rhythms that children can have, like just, like take feeding, right? And right there, something can be going on with the way the needs are playing out for a parent, for various reasons, like the need to keep a roof over your head,
Right.
and needs that come from way back, that just get triggered and stuff. And so, and that's something that I pay a lot of attention to is teasing out, the distinct differences between, where those cues are coming from, within us as parents, like what we're perceiving from our child and what's like bubbling up from us and how we tell the difference.
Yeah. So the feelings that come up in the parent,
Mm-hmm.
I describe it as, to kind of just wrap it, kind of create a cohesive understanding is when we speak about ages and stages, that's just using what we have learned from observing thousands and thousands of kids, either
Mm-hmm.
because that's what the famous psychologists or pediatricians before me and you said and kind of been confirmed with ongoing studies, to our own observations as seasoned clinicians. There's an ages and stages. And so we kind of use that to make sure that the child's moving on, at least in a reasonable forward progression,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
getting too far behind peers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have what the parents are bringing,
Mm-hmm.
which we hope is fairly balanced and integrated and self-contained. But
Mm-hmm.
when we get stretched, we have multiple kids, we have finance concerns, we have aging parents, plus we have little kids, we have job concerns, a lot of adult issues that we need to manage. And when we get overwhelmed, going back to the safety, just like the child having
Mm-hmm.
perceiving safety, we might perceive that there's a lack of safety. And so we'll regress into our defensive approaches,
Mm-hmm.
which are generational trauma usually, because moms and dads gives us good and moms and dads gives us bad. And so we'll go forward with these behaviors when we're stretched thin and we've not slept the best or we have other things. And then we'll start to interpret from our own perception and parent to how we were parented,
Mm-hmm.
which may not be as thoughtful as we could be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I use in my talk, I use the third rail, which I love Marshall Rosenberg. So I'll use Rosenberg to land these kind of conceptual ages and stages and generational trauma. And I'll use Rosenberg to learn to speak right words, right time, to be objective and separate feelings from needs. So we don't act on feelings, but we tie the feeling to a need because needs are actionable. Feelings are just my perception of a situation. And I have to make sure that my feeling ties to an accurate description of the need. And I gave this example at my talk on Sunday was I had a family and they're new to my practice. They have a doctor up north that they still consult. And since I'm the new doctor on the team, I was the last to be consulted on this child who had had a cough for 3 months. And so they hadn't actually seen the physician up north. They were just consulting with him over the phone because that doctor knew the child. And they said, oh, it was allergies or it was psychogenic cough. And so this child was coughing for 3 months. And then they finally came to me because nothing that was being suggested was solving the cough. And I said, no, this child has a sinus infection. Let's treat with a sinus infection. Child goes better 10, 12 days later. Cough was completely gone. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, the child developed another cold. And kids have 6 to 10 colds a year. So it wasn't unusual for this child to have another cold. But then mom comes in, colored from what's just happened. And she said, why is my child getting sick so often? We were just sick for 3 months and now we're sick again.
Yeah.
But that was a feeling.
Yeah.
And that's what I said, no. The child wasn't sick for 3 months. The child was misdiagnosed for 3 months. So the child wasn't actually sick. But that's where, that's just an example of a parent dropping into their feelings and their fear. My child's unnecessarily sick or is sick more than other kids. And so now I'm going to use words that aren't objective, but are coloring my bias. And so I'm scared. And so we had to correct the language, and then she calmed, became more.
Well, boy, I mean, it really highlights the role of a helpful physician or other practitioner who can really be supportive to create perspective, because like you were saying, I mean, we're talking about primal things here, and one of the tricky things is that defensive kinds of structures we have inside at the level of psyche, our minds, right? Those are, just to call them defensive or to call them reactive, or where you're going like, oh, it seems like there's some kind of thing that's different than meeting this particular need. There seems to be something else going on, right? That's what you're talking about. That stuff is all been put in like an autonomic kind of process because when we have to deal with stuff where in our lives before we became parents or whenever, when we're dealing with something that, like we've talked about, perceived threat or major stress or something like that, and we've had to use our fast acting part of our mind, like then we're not thinking things through. We're not getting to like use this frontal area of our brain to sort it all out. We have to move fast to protect ourselves or protect somebody else. And so like part of us gets relegated to this kind of protective effort, and that goes right into an autonomic kind of process. And so then there we are with, who could mean more to us than our child? That just really gets our nervous system pumping, right? And it's my baby. And that is just like cue up the autonomic responses.
Like mama bears coming out. Yeah.
Right, which is outside of our more thoughtful awareness.
Yes.
So it's so helpful to parents to be able to have access to providers. Really just hearing you talk, sitting and listening to you, I'm like, I could just sit here and listen to you, because I think, oh, I wish you'd been my pediatrician. I mean, no, we had a great pediatrician, but you don't often hear like all the thoughtfulness, behind the kinds of choices your pediatrician is making or other practitioner, so it's really fun to hear these things from you. And it's just such a great support, because it gives, that's one of the resources then that we have, if we have the access to that kind of caring and sophisticated support, to be able to step back a little bit and to make the distinction between what, like you said, is very natural for a child, not something necessarily to be worried about, or to at least like we can be thoughtful about it together.
Saying it in ways that just that resonate with people. And that's, and the mom was willing, she said, you're right. I'm not using it because she's looking for the right answer, and she had to go through her recent trauma with her child, and then reorganize it.
Yeah,
which, I guess it's like we are a collection, not a series. We're a collection of sub-personalities, and sometimes one of them, and primarily the primal ones, have an ability to pound down all the logical ones. and
Right.
take the driver's seat and run the bus off the cliff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and that's what I get fascinated on with parenting
Mm-hmm.
is how do we help the parent? What are we doing as parents? Like, how do we, talk to the mom that, no, I can't let my child cry. Well, babies cry. So I don't use an endpoint of crying.
Right.
And avoiding crying is an endpoint. That's a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So, putting the boob in the mouth every time the baby calls out is not past the first 2 months. Again, ages and stages, past the point. So how do I help the mother? And it's always a process. That's why I love this one, because it's the first time mother is like, yeah, no, I'm going to continue nursing my baby because I want to have that experience. And then the second child comes, and sometimes I'll get a phone call from a dad after the second child saying everything's going upside down here because mom's trying to do everything for both kids and manage the house, and then the house is falling down. And that's dad usually, if I'm hearing something bad, it's usually from the dad after the second kid. And then he wants mom to find some balance. With the third kid, if they haven't listened to put the child and teach the child to sleep through the night, the mother's like, what was that you were telling me? And I'll say, well, this is how we sleep train. And then after 3 to 5 nights, because that's all it takes,
She's like,
that's all it took.
Sign me up.
Yeah. Well, they were like, it was that easy. And she was like, I should have done it with my first. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a process,
Yeah,
So that's what I'm fascinated by, is how do we take somebody through a process to recognize their generational trauma, because what they're doing is they're parenting to themselves, because having a kid is re-experiencing your own lack of or the positive parts of your childhood, and you're re-experiencing it in these moments. And I've almost always found that the mother that continues and insists to nurse through the night past the time that the baby needs to nurse is making up for something that she didn't have from her mom. Almost always. Yeah. And then
Reasonable guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I teach a workshop on this actually.
Oh, good. So let's go.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm thinking of bringing that back, starting to do that again. It's called the parenting process, and it's based on the work of a wonderful mentor that I studied with for a long time, still my friend. Her name's Dr. Eileen Paris, and it's exactly about this. The question is, how do we not pass down? How do we not pass down that generational trauma, those patterns, right? And how do we even recognize that they're there?
Because they're so deep. I mean, they come in wired before we even have an ability to have logic. Because by the time you're 3 or 4, that stuff's set. At least unless you have a major traumatic event after that, which is.
But children really bring things up. I mean, if anybody in this world is going to push our buttons,
it's your kid.
It's going to be your kid.
Yeah.
Or your kids, right? Spouse, all that, yes, too. But there's something special about children being connected to your body, and that goes for adoptive parents as well, because when you're an adoptive parent, it's just a phenomenal thing of signing up. I mean, we're all these human beings, we're all in the family together, right? We're all connected, and when you sign up for that, it's okay, our bodies, we're giving them to that. It's like we're being related through our bodies. And anyway, not to get off on that, but when I teach this workshop, the parenting process, we spend time looking at what are the themes that come up when you have a stress response with your child. How do you recognize that you are having a stress response in reaction to your child, and practices for grounding so that you can get back into, some call it the wise mind, or maybe what's his name?
Rosenberg.
Rosenberg.
Marshall Rosenberg.
Marshall. Yeah, Rachel Rosenberg. She's a performance artist.
Okay.
Right, Marshall. How do you ground yourself enough once you recognize that you are in a reactive state? I mean, just having the courage and and the fortitude to try to practice recognizing that you're in a reactive state, like that's
It takes a while, and it takes some beating down, and
it takes the desire,
well, there has to start with a
right,
desire.
to be there for your child, to be there for yourself too, and so then finding ways to calm your nervous system and enough to be able to investigate what themes are at play, what kinds of, like when you were saying subpersonalities, what part of yourself has come forward to deal with this situation and has like pulled you out of your center because it feels like it's reacting to some kind of emergency or and then going out of presence. So how we bring ourselves back into really connected presence and get to know about these themes and that leads us. It's like a trailhead there for us that leads us into understanding ourselves better and what's the things that pop up in us in reactive mode, what they're connected to back there, and being able to bring our presence to that and some healing time for us as adults, and then come forward to be able to listen in a more present way and attend to our children in a more present way, both respecting their need for connection and also for autonomy.
Yes. Yeah, and learning how, and that's where the process comes in, like the example of not, I'm exhausted, but I'm nursing my baby because I think that's really important. And the second child, I'm even more exhausted, but I'm going to meet the needs of my toddler and my baby. And now things are starting to fall apart around me. And then the third child comes. Now we've moved through several steps of a processing. I'm ready to make changes now. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said the beat down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to bring yourself to the point where you don't have anything left to give. And unfortunately, I find most people aren't ready to correct really deeply primal, deeply ingrained family thought patterns until they've been walked up to the edge. And very few of us, in my experience, can make those changes prior to that kind of, I'm at a crossroad event and I need to either take care of myself or I need to make changes in this relationship with somebody else.
Yeah. Well, and then, so there's the increasing load, right? What you're talking about, right? Yes. Of needs in a family that can, be increased a lot by multiple children. And then there's also symptoms kids can have because kids don't have, in fact, lots of us don't have, but kids don't have the language to talk about, hey, this is going on with me. They're expressing it through their bodies, yes, through their behaviors. And I view my job very much to be like, what is that about?
Sherlock Holmes of subtle symptoms.
Yes, subtle or dramatic. I mean, right. Well, actually, I guess what I was going to say, you were saying like by the third child, people are like, please help me.
Yeah.
But
definitely, I haven't seen anybody go past 3 and be able to pull it off.
But I can tell you that I have just one, and I felt quite brought to my knees. I mean, and so, it can be any amount of children. I know you have like the ultimate.
I have a lot. So
you have a lot,
but there was something I do want to say was I have so the pediatrician that trained me tied, and you may have seen this video where I said you're not a parent, so you have more than one kid.
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, which of course people in my office have one child, and so they're like, they walk in my office like, I really don't like when you post that video. So I will, and so.
But I get you.
Yeah, but the reason I'm bringing this up is it's because of what I say is you're not really a parent to have more than one child, which is really a statement of until you have to manage resources, you're not really engaged, and it's easy when there's plenty. It's easy to have lots of friends when there's cash that's abundant, right? But when you have a lot of resources, you're not really getting stretched because you can cover things more easily.
One might imagine, I mean.
Let me finish what I was saying on this.
Sorry.
So what I said was it's managing resources. Then I had feedback from a lot of different parents. They're like, well, what about special needs kids? And I said, well, now you're managing resources. What if you're a single parent? You're managing resources. Say that, having one child and there's, there could be other things like, well, I was unable to conceive more. I mean, there's other things that'll come about. So I made another video which hasn't aired yet, but talking about how, it's our learning into parenting and to be a parent can come in many different ways.
Yeah.
And so, getting knocked down, doesn't. I forget why I started talking about that why I brought that up when you said one, but anyways.
What you would no, you were right that that I was referencing that because I've been getting a lot out of your podcast. Truth be told.
The teaching parents to recognize their trauma, which is the hardest, where I was saying that they usually have to be brought to their knees. There has to be something that collapses them for them to say, well, maybe what I've been doing, which I've been just programmed to do without thought, because that's where we go when we're not in our right mind, is we just react. How do we move them there before they, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. Now I've got a 4-year-old that's refusing to eat and go to bed because I've been so preoccupied with these other kids, or I have been parenting in a way that hasn't been meeting their ages and stages and making them feel safe. I look at it as when a parent, as I said earlier, is like if there's too many boundaries or not enough boundaries, then the child doesn't feel safe because there's not enough boundaries and they don't know where they can safely go. So they'll act out to make you answer that question through age-appropriate behavior, which is acting out. Or if we're over the top of them, we're all wired to be independent and autonomous. And every revolution of every government or king has been a rising of the people because they weren't given enough freedom and autonomy. So that's really what you get. You get an uprising, a political uprising in your house from your child if you're too heavy over them. So how do we help a parent wake up to what they're instinctively bringing to the table, because we all think our instincts are right. I've not met a person who walks around thinking that they're parenting incorrectly, for the most part.
No. It just makes me think.
None of us are walking around thinking my ideas are so wrong, but I'm going to push them into the world because they're my ideas. We all think that we're all thinking correctly.
Yeah.
And so what come to me is like you have to have some. It's like how do people move into alternative medicine? You're either raised in a family where that was practice, or you have had a chronic health, because we can intellectualize. Well, of course we have to eat healthy and take our supplements because the food doesn't have enough of the nutrients to cover all the supplements. So we have to take supplements. And of course it makes sense that we should exercise every day and drink plenty of fluids. But how many of us actually do that?
Right. You know what? I'm thinking, I have the benefit, we're in different places. I mean, you see all kinds of families. And I see families who, people come to you for well checks. People are coming to you for how tall are we? How much do we weigh now? Is everything good? Right. As well as if somebody gets a cold, a whole range, right? But it can be like, everything's good, right? I'll see you guys next year.
Right. And a lot of people will do that.
Right. And so for me, I have a psychotherapy practice, right? People only come to see me when they feel something's wrong. So I have the benefit of having something presented to me, whether what's being presented is actually what we really ultimately end up needing to get to, but at least people are coming and going, we perceive there's a problem. It's his fault. No.
Right. That's his.
No, I'm just kidding. But so, I mean, the great thing about that is that somebody is coming in and asking for help. They're perceiving that there's some sort of a problem. And so, and for me, I'm looking at a problem as there's some sort of communication about something going on.
Right. So your population's already seeking.
What is it about? Yeah.
The opportunity, whereas my population may not even be aware that there's an issue.
Yeah.
So we have a different.
So that's a difference.
Cohort to pull from.
Yeah.
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 And so that's so my job's harder.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I go to dinner with once a month one of the psychologists in town. He and I will go out to dinner, and I was like, I don't know how I would be able to sit in your chair all day long and hear these horrible stories, and then he's like, I don't know how you sit in your chair, but we're all designed and cut of
different
cloths, right? To do what we do.
Yeah.
And then obviously, there's just a willingness to participate.
Well, I'm sure Udo would agree that it's an incredible experience to have somebody come in like that because, they've summoned the courage to lay something bare in front of you, and maybe it's not as vulnerable as it could be later or something, but I mean they've summoned some kind of courage to walk in the door. So that in itself is very sacred.
Yes, it is. Well,
and
just being in the healthcare field is sacred.
Yes, exactly.
There's no other maybe a minister, like they're the only ones that get to sit on that perch and look into somebody else's house.
Yeah. And certainly, I guess we can approach any problem solving, any kind of professions are all about helping people with problems or providing needs or something like that. So I guess that's in everything. But I really I'm just very struck by people coming in. I see adults. It's about 50% of my practice is adults, and I see a lot of children, about 50%, and just the vulnerability, right, of coming in and saying something is not going so well, something or
right,
and then we can be curious about it. Certainly, and understandably, people want something that's going to eliminate pain quickly, and that doesn't always happen quite like that. Or, a lot of times with children, when people are bringing in children, there's a lot of times an assumption about like an outside-in approach, because we get concerned about maybe our child not behaving like other children, or not fitting an image of what we feel is right for that child, and that may be really good information, probably is really good information. And so we can really be stimulated as parents to then want to get things to look right. And so what I find is that the real way for growth and actual healing to happen is to connect with the inside.
And that's maybe what you were speaking about before we went online was the empathic attunement. Yes.
Yeah.
Is that figuring out what's inside?
Yeah.
Like what's making them feel alive?
Yes.
What's making them feel alive? Like what because it's one thing, like just to return the concept to practicality is, like I was out to dinner with my brother and his wife and their 12-year-old son, and the three of us adults were speaking adult talk. So of course the 12-year-old boy is pulling out his Game Boy, even though we were at a restaurant, and he knows we don't play with games at dinner tables, and that was part of the culture that we're in. And so my brother was like, "Stop, put that away. We don't do that at the table." So this kid's left with nothing to do because we're doing adult talk, and so he's just sitting by himself. And well, let me pull out my Game Boy. So like 3 or 4 times happened getting punished because he's not doing what my brother thought was appropriate table behavior. And I connected to what was inside. "Hey, Miles, my brother doesn't want you to play with that because you know why. And we're doing adult talking, which is boring to you, because I know that adult talk was boring to me when I was your age. And so you want to be entertained. My brother doesn't want you to use the Game Boy to be entertained. And you're not finding entertainment with us, and you can't get up and walk away from the table, so you're doing the best you can." And I said, "So how about you put that away, and we'll stop doing adult talk, and we'll do something that's entertaining for all 4 of us and talk about that." Boom, went it done. And so that's that connecting to what's alive in him. He wanted to have some entertainment, and he wasn't having an opportunity. So I was just landing what it means to be empathically attuned.
Story. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but how do you get to that? I mean, because, so many parents would have been like, "Now you're grounded because this is the 3rd time I told you that." And now we're moving them away from empathic attunement.
Right, right. It just strikes me hearing you say that, the complexity involved in the mental process, the mental and heart presence process of parenting, because, you had to see what was going on between all of you guys and consider what was happening with the little fellow there, right. Playing on his Game Boy, and what that might have felt like to him. So you're able to hold in your mind all those considerations and also have some like feeling for him in it. And I really like that phrase that you use, his aliveness, or is that what you said?
What makes him feel alive?
What makes him feel alive? Yeah. Do you know Stanley Greenspan, the psychiatrist who created DIR floor time? Well, we'll talk more about it, but he would always talk about the gleam in the child's eye. Like go for the gleam. Where's the gleam? Where is it now? What's happening with it?
They light up.
Yeah.
You see that when they get a math concept, like.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And even just like we just had it right now, right?
Yeah.
Like we connected about something, and then like, so you're coordinated. That's a high order kind of process there to coordinate that. And I was also thinking when you're describing that, how you had the other adults to relate to, and like that being cool with everybody to like shift gears.
Yeah. I asked permission from my brother before I did that.
Right.
So I just didn't jump in there because
right.
I didn't want to usurp his authority.
Yeah, right. So then you had that too. So like that just is a really good example of complex problem solving, right? Of in an interpersonal way. Yeah.
And that's just learning, how to slow down enough.
Yeah.
And and I'll speak to parents about, I call it company policy, because you go to Walmart and you've had this article of clothing for 3 weeks, and then you go up and I'd like to exchange this. I haven't worn it. The tags are still on it. Well, sorry, our return policy is 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you're just kind of left like, well, that's stupid, but that's company policy,
right?
And so okay, well, this person can't overrule that, and so you're kind of stuck. Okay, well, I guess I got this. I'm going to give it away as a gift or something like that, right? So you're stuck. But it's really ultimately a human decision behind it. But except when you interface with a corporation, you don't get the human face. You get the company policy.
Right.
So with families, when there's an issue ongoing, like they don't want to go to bed, they don't want to eat at the food, then bedtime, focus on that. Well, then if the child's old enough, can honor them in their ages and stages. So I'll tell family to make lanyards or like a poster board and brush teeth, change pajamas, bedtime book, bath, whatever, put it in order that you guys do. And then you put the lanyards around the child's neck and they take them off as they accomplish those things. So you're creating a company policy. So as a parent, you're not putting yourself in a position of every night, have you done that? Have you done that? Because nobody wants to be harked on like that. The kid's not enjoying it. You're not enjoying having to say it multiple times. So you create a company policy. I know there's a human in there, but instead of me, I'm also human, having to go through this irritating series of reminders all night long, which is only going to put me into an unpleasant mood.
Right.
I'm going to company policy this. So things that can be automated. Our goal, what we should always try to do is take what's conscious and put it into the subconscious, so it becomes automatic. And so that this would be kind of an externalization of that. So that's what I work with parents. But again, how do you get them to that point? Because we're not given we don't have the wisdom of the ages anymore. We've moved away from our hometowns. We don't have grandmother, living upstairs, or the unmarried aunt in the house. When I was growing up, my grandmother and an aunt and their mother all lived in the same house. So you had this generational wisdom coming down. You might find that in older cultures, but for the most part, we're not finding it too often here because we're all too independent and we want to go off on our own. And so that's always the question. It's like that's the key that I'm always looking for is how.
Well, that I think this is the connection you're making, right? With when you talk about the generational wisdom, is that it's there's a flow of these patterns of how people do things. Like, there's like when you say company policy, like everybody's going to bed.
Right.
There's that entrainment. I talk about entrainment sometimes with parents about, especially for certain kids, that they like, so like, for example, a kid who may be having difficulty with getting to sleep at home may go to camp and like, boom, it's like they sleep when everybody else sleeps. It's that entrainment with everybody's doing it this way, and they get in tune with that rhythm. And that makes me think of what you're saying about the generational wisdom is that there's ways that the people have of doing things that have come through the wisdom of the tribe,
right?
Or right,
the ages,
and they're very human and connected, and if it's that intact, it even has maybe like a sacredness to it, or like this is really, we all feel how this is how we're taking care of ourselves. It's not just, did you do your
yeah, it's
we all can relate to, but
and then the child like at camp, and we'll see this at school. It's like, well, they behave at school. The teacher says that she's excellent, sits there all day, and then at home she's just not. You get that all the time. You're bowing your head because you hear that all the time. That is when the child at camp and sleeps through the night and they don't sleep at night at home, or they behave at school and not. It's because they prioritize. They have a need that's being met. Like it's more important for me to be part of this group than it is for me to be defiant. At home, since I don't have enough freedom or there's too much control, then I value disruption over the sleep. I go out with my friends, I'm at school or I'm at camp. Now, social consistency is more important because I don't want to be seen as problematic because I want to have these friends. And so I'll put disruption behind that other need. And so that's where I'll say to the family, well, your child can clearly behave. So what's happening is we have to figure out why the child is prioritizing misbehavior in whatever phase that is at home.
Well, and of course, so many complexities, right? I mean, we can go on and
Not
on,
that
but I get we get the point, right? Yeah. And anyway, we can go on and on, Brian.
I don't even know what time.
I feel like
it's
I'll
already
be
1:25.
I'll be
so we've been
keeping
going
you.
over now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me figure out. Let's wrap something up.
This is such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's fun.
Really, yeah. Really is.
Look, I don't want to hang there.
Yeah.
So I think for the most part, kids, everyone for the most part, except for a small portion of the population, really just wants life to be good and wants to work with other people and wants to make life, like I said, wonderful for each other.
And want to please their parents.
They want to do all that. We want to make our kids happy. And when we find ourselves or our children not living to that potential, then we have to stop and say, okay, we're missing the mark, and this is only going to go further and further astray if I don't get this back on track. And so it's just like hiking and you took the wrong path. You don't know how far that's going to take you from where you were trying to go. And so, like we said before, this all stacks. And so when I generally find when things are really out of control, it's the 4-year-old. That's when the kid can really start to wreak havoc in the house. Up to that point, I think the parents can do a lot of control and keep that monster in the box. But then at 4, the kids parent can't control it anymore, and then they'll come to me or you and start to say, I just had this, be like, can you just talk to my 5-year-old and tell them to go to sleep? And I'm like, no, I can't talk to your 5-year-old and tell them, because they won't. They're just like, wah,
Dr.
Wah,
Brian
wah. Yeah, it won't mean anything to that kid. So we have to get to you. I have to talk to you as the parent. But so speaking to the parents out there, is when life isn't fluid, because we should inherently want to make life. I mean, just look how we are with our friends.
Yeah.
We give and take to make life wonderful with our friends. Look how we work with our coworkers, for the most part, in a healthy work environment. We're going to give and take to make life wonderful for everybody, and show up when somebody's sick, and we cover for each other, and that's making life wonderful, because sometimes it might be us that needs to receive. And so if that's not happening in the house, we have to here, I guess, go find you when that's not happening.
Yeah, I'm hearing those issues that people bring in, and I'm wondering, what is that behavior expressing to us? What is it telling us about?
All anybody's ever saying is please and thank you.
How do you mean?
If I go rob a bank, I'm saying please give me money. In a very suicidal, pathological way. Okay. If I'm having a temper tantrum as an adult at the checkout line at Publix because it's long and there's one person checking everybody out,
getting to your needs.
I'm getting back to to me, the needs are so simple. If life isn't working between the two of us, we got to figure out why. Because both of us, unless somebody's mentally ill, we want things to work out.
Right. And the thing is, absolutely. And when we find a way to listen carefully, sometimes we don't know what has affected our child. Like when we were talking about perception, like perceived threat, like sometimes a kid can be having some kind of feeling or behavior that's getting our attention, and making us feel worried that they're kind of like not on track, maybe with or something, like something's getting our attention. And sometimes kids have experienced something that we didn't know happened that affected them. It was maybe not from us or something from us, or, and whole other conversation, but how children express their experience somatically, and verbally, and through play, symbolic. Children are highly symbolic, right? And so, so there's, so we're talking about working with these different tracks of like listening for, the mystery of what's going on. A child's mind is very different than an adult's mind. And then also keeping in mind, like you and I have also been talking about a lot today, of like, where are they at developmentally? How are we attending to that? How are we in touch with that? And then being open to whatever is going to come forward as we have a caring, attuned inquiry.
And we have to feel safe as the parent in order to be able to create that space for the child to.
Yes.
Yes. And so that's why I guess we could close on that, is
Yeah.
like when a husband and wife, and this is a simple one, can't settle their differences and they go to therapy, the good therapist will create a bond and a trust with each of them so they both can feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
So then hopefully the therapist can reunite them because now they both feel that the therapist gets them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's recharging their emotional batteries.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's enough of a recharge that they can reconnect the husband and wife. But the same things happen with the parent-child, but easier to
Yeah.
understand adult to adult.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well said.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, say how people can find you and if you're even looking for people, for more clients.
I'm hiding from,
Yeah.
no. Well, I work in North Naples, and you can find me on Psychology Today. Just look up Sara Henry. You can just look up Sara Henry, Naples therapist.
Yep.
I don't have my own website right now. I'm not sure that I will again. I just kind of use Psychology Today. I might rebuild one. And
But you have a very busy practice. Yeah.
I do, but I do. And at
Not
the
to
same
discourage people
time-
from contacting
No,
you. That's not my point.
really,
It's just like, she's good.
There's something about that's very nice. There's something about when people feel like they need to work with me, because usually it's through somebody's referred them, or oftentimes. Then I don't know. The heavens open. We usually figure out the time. It usually works out if it's going to work
Right.
out, and so I don't often say, my practice is all filled up and I can't see anybody. I usually figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on the Dr. Thornburg Wellness Podcast. Come for the science and common sense. Stay because it works.